You say the average Australian citizen supports Taiwan. Do you think that's the case? Do they know why Taiwan is so important?
I don't think the average citizen probably knows why Taiwan is important militarily, and I think that's certainly a job that the government needs to do better. And as chair of the Liberal Party's Defence and National Security Policy branch, that's something that I try to do both internally within the party, because there's also a lot of party members who have no idea of why Taiwan is strategically and militarily crucial to the safety of Australia. But what we do, certainly since COVID times, a lot of it, well, all of our meetings are now just like this. So they're done via video conference. And we've opened up our video conferences to not just party members, but to others. And so, yeah, I think that Australian public supports Taiwan more because they see Taiwan as a fellow democratic, freedom-loving society that doesn't want to get crushed under the boot of the Chinese communists. Australian public, our media has been quite good at showing what the Chinese communists have been doing to the Uyghurs and to Hong Kong. So this whole one country, two systems thing, well, how did that work out for Hong Kong? It didn't. The Chinese communists lied. They had a deal in place with the British. They broke the deal. They did whatever they wanted, and they crushed whatever democracy and freedom that was left in Hong Kong. So Australians have seen that on our media, and they've seen the concentration camps where they're shaving the heads of these poor Uyghurs simply because they're Muslim and they're not ethnically Han Chinese, and they're sticking in them in so-called re-education camps. So the Australian public kind of looks at that and goes, well, hang on, that's not right. That's not cool. It's not fair. Why would we support China reunifying with Taiwan when we know that they will crush them, and they have thousands of missiles pointed at them, and they fly their fighter jets at an increasing number over their island every day? That doesn't sound like peaceful reunification to anybody. So
besides obviously these moral support that Australians feel towards Taiwan, walk us through what would be, over time, the direct impact on Australians should the Communist Party successfully conquer Taiwan and bring it under their rule. Like, what's going to happen to the rest of Southeast Asia and the neighboring islands?
Well, yeah, it's a good question, Matt. I mean, it's scary because, as I said, we aren't a major superpower. We're a small country living on a very large island. We only have 25 million people. Our armed forces, whilst very high quality and awesome fighters, are really tiny. If we were to have a head-to-head war with the Chinese military, we'd last 5 minutes. We have to fight with an ally. We have to be able to fight with the United States and others if they were to come along. So I think what China tries to do, and we talked about this before, is rather than what the Soviets did, which was full-on frontal attacks all of the time, China tries to rot you from within. And so the Liberal governments under both Malcolm Turnbull and Scott Morrison have been trying to stop that from a legislative perspective. So we've banned Huawei, for instance. We have legislation that prevents foreign interference, foreign influence, and all those sorts of things. And they're squarely aimed at China, even though that's not stated. I mean, it's aimed at any country, but really it's only China that does that on any major scale. So what would happen if the Chinese communists were to take Taiwan would be, as I said before, the other countries in the region would begin to submit to China's will. I'm not saying that China would go and necessarily invade the Philippines. They may build more artificial islands. They may take an island or two from Japan that we can talk about later. But we will see that these other countries in the regions will essentially become vassal states. Now, in time, when Australia is ringed, we are encircled, what are you going to do? And then you've got the other half of the Australian politics being the Labor Party. And okay, sure, I am partisan, but I would give them due if there was due to be given. The Labor Party come out very strongly with an engagement policy with China. They've always wanted to engage and manage the China relationship. So the Labor Party of Australia, or the Australian Labor Party's patron saint, is a guy called Gough Whitlam, who was a disaster as a prime minister. But his claim to fame was that he got to Beijing before Nixon and started our diplomatic relationship. And since then, you've had a number of Labor leaders whose mantra is to engage and work with the Chinese, which is, what we did right up until Malcolm Turnbull sort of said, well, hang on, no, this is not right. And Scott Morrison has actually taken the ball from Malcolm Turnbull and run even further with it.
Well, so I'm glad you brought this up. Like, Australia has changed dramatically in its view of China over the years, but as I understand, there is still pushback against that there are some elements of the government, maybe society, that want to return things to the status quo.
Well, that's right. So, of course, you're going to have some elements of business that want to make money, and I get that. You're a business, you want profit. China is our largest trading partner, primarily because they buy our iron ore and our coal, but they used to buy all sorts of stuff, from wine and sorghum, and you mentioned lobsters and things like that. So you're going to get pushback from certain elements of the business community who want to make money, and that's pretty much how New Zealand runs its foreign policy. It's a mercantilist sort of foreign policy, mercantilist and defeatist, in my opinion. And then on the other side of politics, as I mentioned, you've got the Labor Party, which is sort of similar to your Democratic Party in some ways. However, they've sort of left representing the worker. And you've got former prime ministers who are on the payroll, Labor prime ministers who are on the payroll of the Chinese. So you've got former Prime Minister Paul Keating, who is always, he has an acid tongue, and he comes out and he insults America as much as he possibly can. He insults our Australian government as much as he possibly can. He's also on the board of the China Development Bank, right? And a friend of mine said, well, you shouldn't say that he's on the payroll because it's actually an unpaid position. And I said, well, how's that any better? So he's working for the Chinese for free. And then you've got your friend, Kevin Rudd, who lives just around the corner in New York, and he works for the Asia Society, and he's also a China engagement manager. And then you've just got the Labor Party themselves who agree with managing the China relationship through engagement. We all understand what engagement means. It means giving in to the Chinese Communist Party. It means going back to the old days where they had a lot of influence over us and could call the shots on foreign policy and could go through their list of 14 demands that they had of the Australian government, and we would put up with it. So essentially you become a vassal state. Now, for the elites, that's great. So if you're an elite academic, if you're Paul Keating, or if you're an elite politician, or you sell a lot of coal, you're probably going to be okay, right? But for the average Australian, you don't want to be a vassal. A lot of Australians fought and died and spilled blood for this country, actually alongside the Americans, to do that, particularly in World War II. And they want to keep our freedom and they want to keep our democracy. And so, yeah, we're kind of battling against that. And, I am getting political and I am in the Liberal Party. I do want to see Scott Morrison return. We're going to have an election early next year. It's not just because I'm a Liberal. I'm certainly no one-eyed Liberal, and I get in trouble for saying things all of the time. I don't particularly want to be a politician myself. But I worry that if we do elect a Labor government, that we will go back to the good old days of engagement and managed relationship and bowing down and kowtowing to China. That'd be disastrous.
You mentioned, the business people who want to do business in China and do the trade and things like that. And I think When you mentioned the U.S. earlier could take a harder stance against China than it is doing, I think that's one of the main battles we're facing. Politically in D.C., it seems like standing up to China has become one of the few bipartisan issues that's happened over the last couple of years, especially with what's happened in Hong Kong with the Uyghurs. But there's still this very large Wall Street business lobby that is constantly trying to, push back to let's not decouple, let's recouple
Or
with China.
as the trade representative just said, durable coexistence,
Yeah,
whatever
and
that means.
she also used recoupling in her speech that she said recently. And I was wondering, in Australia, with the punishment that you've been going through on the trade sector over the last year, essentially, has that changed people's minds about trading with China, or are people still are the business people still that gung-ho about it?
So I don't think it's changed the minds of the average citizen whatsoever. So if you look at the polling that we take on a regular basis of Australians' attitudes towards the Chinese Communist Party, they've fallen off a cliff. So business are aware of that. So they have to tread cautiously. We in recent times we've heard the business lobbyists come out and say that we should start re-engaging with China. So we do have some of that. We don't have as powerful a Wall Street that you have that makes billions of dollars or whatever it is off doing business with China. Whether people win or lose, they still take their cut. So we don't have that. And what the Australian government also did was to try and use our trade agencies as best as we could to try and find other markets for our goods and services. And so when you look at the totality of trade, whilst they hit us really hard on a number of our exports, and we've talked about those, and sorghum and wine and whatever, the overall trade has kept pretty steady because the price of iron ore was at record highs, and so we make a ton of money from exporting iron ore, which we do to China primarily, but also coal. So particularly with this energy crisis, the coal price has gone up. So our export earnings haven't taken that big a hit, actually. So from an overall perspective, it hasn't. Their trade war against us, even though they're meant to be members of the WTO, their trade war against us for political reasons has not worked.